ho capito.
Ti auguro la fortuna.
Grazie.
Today is the 16th of July, 2009. We are at the New York State Military Museum in Saratoga Springs, New York. My name is Wayne Clark. Sir, for the record, would you please state your full name and your date and place of birth, please?
My name is Michael, Michael J. Papa, P-A-P-A. I was born in Brooklyn, New York on March 29th, 1919.
All right. And did you attend school in Brooklyn?
Yes, I attended elementary school. I graduated elementary school in the 8th grade and went on to high school, at which I stayed for 2 years, and then due to the depression and lack of employment, etc., times were pretty bad. And my mother was incapable of going to business. My dad had just retired. He was about 65, 66 years old at the time.
What kind of work did your father do?
My father was a carpenter, building carpenter, worked mostly on large buildings in New York City. He worked for a big company, I think it was called Knickerbocker Construction Company, and he had become a foreman in the carpentry division, and he had worked there for maybe about 20 years or so, maybe even more, I don't recall.
All right. Once you dropped out of high school, you went to work?
Yes.
And what kind of work did you do?
The first job I got outside, can't even remember, but I think the first full-time job working, I think I either worked in a toy factory or a machine shop. One or the other were the first.
Okay. So in the either the toy factory or the machine shop, did you operate machinery?
In the machine shop, yes. In the machine shop, I operated an automatic welder, and at times I worked on a lathe. But I didn't stay in the machine shop for long. I know I moved on to another job. Of course, it was the time of depression, and if there was any chance of advancing myself as far as monetary, I took the advantages.
Do you recall where you were and what you were doing when you heard about the attack on Pearl Harbor?
Yes, I was in a movie house in Brooklyn, New York, called the New York Orpheum Theater, and I had come out at the end of the show, and that's when I found a lot of excitement outside, and after asking someone, I found out that war had started.
How did you feel about that? Did you know where Pearl Harbor was?
No, I had no idea. I had no idea where Pearl Harbor was, and I was stunned and interested in view of the fact that I had heard quite a bit about the First World War.
Did you have any family members that served in the First World War?
No, the only closest thing I had was my father worked in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, helping on the ship rebuilds, buildings and repairs during the war. But he was never called into the service actually.
Okay. All right. How did that attack on Pearl Harbor change your life? Did you notice an immediate change in the city as a whole?
The big change was that confusion, because we never had experienced such a big shock, such a big piece of news. Also, I was in the National Guard. So
you were in the National Guard at that time?
Yes. And I think either I had just gotten out of, my term had expired, had just expired, or I was still in it. But of course, the initial shock, and having been in the National Guard, we got a little idea of what would happen in the event of a war.
Now, do you recall what unit you were with the
Yes,
National Guard?
109th Infantry, no, excuse me, 105th Field Artillery National Guard in Brooklyn, New York.
All right. And how long had you been in the National Guard?
I served 3 years in there.
And what sort of training did you have? Did you go away to basic training during
Yeah,
that?
we went away every year for 2 weeks of basic training in the field artillery.
All right. And whereabouts did you go for that? Was it up at...
In Long Island someplace, I don't remember where now.
Okay. Was it Camp Shanks?
No,
Okay.
no, wait a minute, no, excuse me. I didn't go for that I went up to upstate New York.
Camp...
Pine Camp, it was
Pine
at the
Camp,
time.
okay.
Yeah, it's Pine, it's different now. Too.
Yes, it's Fort Drum now.
Okay, but I know it was Pine Camp when I went up there. When I went up there was only one piece of concrete,
Mm-hmm.
and that was just enough to hold maybe a company or two of men
Mm-hmm.
for parade services.
All right. Now, you mentioned you had just gotten out of the National Guard when the war started.
Just about, yes.
Were you called back into the National Guard at all?
No, no. I wasn't called back into the National Guard for the same reason that I wasn't accepted into the Army, because I had a mother and father who were disabled,
Mhm.
and that was the only means of support.
All right. Had you tried to enlist in the Army?
Yes, yes. I think it was the first week or second that I tried to enlist, and they told me I wasn't acceptable because of my, actually they didn't tell me, they just told me I wasn't acceptable. And that was in, just after the war started.
Mm-hmm.
But about a year or two later, I heard of a situation where I might get into the Army. I went down to enlist, and when they found out my family situation, they told me, no, you're not in.
All right. And during that time, during the war, what sort of work did you do at that point?
Automobile mechanic.
All right. And you worked for a dealership, or?
Yes, dealership.
And what type of cars?
Oldsmobile.
Olds? Okay.
I worked there for all told 17 years.
Mm-hmm. Now, during that time period, didn't they cease production of new cars?
Yeah, I did about 1 year or 2 years.
Mhm.
That's all they did. They ceased production, and then they went right back into production. I think.
I think
I
about
know they were
46.
making 1941s when they stopped,
Uh-huh.
and I think in 1943 or 1944 they started again.
Okay. What about work? Did you have a lot of work to do keeping the older cars
Oh
going?
yeah, busy.
Mm-hmm.
There was plenty of work. It was just no money.
Uh-huh.
You compare it to today's wages,
Mhm.
it's ridiculous.
What was it like as far as rationing went? Did you have any problems getting basic foods?
I had problems getting gasoline, which was a big thing because that affected my income.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, the foods coming from an old Italian family, both my mother and father were born in Italy and came here in the early 1900s. So they were accustomed to the way of life in Italy,
Mm-hmm.
more like country life, small town life. Our food supply was not as necessary as most Americans, because most Americans ate a lot of meats
Mhm.
and so forth, whereas the Italians ate a lot of vegetables. So growing a little bit of vegetables in the back in the yard, and the knowledge that my mother and dad had of cooking Italian style,
Mm-hmm.
we ate, but we didn't have the big thing, like meat.
Mm-hmm.
We were lucky if we had it once a week rather.
Mhm.
And We had a lot of vegetables,
Mhm.
so forth. But we ate.
Sounds like
Gained
you,
weight.
it sounds like you ate a healthy diet.
Yes, yes. And the best part of it is that we enjoyed it.
Mhm.
So while we were restricted from eating meats, it didn't affect us too much because meat was not part of our diet even when we were, you know, comfortable financially.
Mhm.
It wasn't part of our diet. Meat was once a week, and sometimes when we had guests.
Mhm. Okay, and then eventually you ended up going into the Army in 1945, you
Yes,
stated.
it was.
Now, at that point, were you drafted or did you enlist?
No, I was drafted.
And,
Women and children, then they took us.
all right. Do you recall how old you were at the time? You must have been in your,
Well, I think I got drafted in 45.
you were
I was
about
born-
26
I was
then.
19 years old. I was born in 19, excuse me. I was
Mhm.
born in 19, so I got drafted in 45, so, yeah.
Okay. And do you recall when in 1945, what month?
I don't know, but it must have been in the warm weather.
Mhm.
That's about the only recollection I have.
All right. Because I know the war ended in Europe in April, and then the war with Japan finally ended in August.
Yes, that I remember. I remember that more distinctly than I remember the day I went into it.
All right. Whereabouts did you go for your basic training?
A good question. Basic training actually was in Florida.
Oh, you went down to Florida.
Yes.
And how did you get down there? Did you go by train or bus?
I go by train.
By
The
train?
Army brought me down there. I
Okay.
walked to the place where I had to go to the Army station in Fort Hamilton, Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't too far. No, I took a trolley car, so, but it wasn't a big distance. But I know from there I went to Fort Dix. And Fort Dix I got clothing and blankets and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the next morning, actually very early the next morning, we boarded a train, and I think it took us 2 days to get to Florida.
Now, were you married at that point?
No.
No? All right. And once you got down to Florida, what sort of basic training was it? Was it your standard infantry type basic?
Yes. Yes. That's why I was looking to get out.
Mm-hmm.
I went there and, I don't know, I guess maybe it's a usual situation or, you know, to get you excited
Mm-hmm.
and interested, but I was called out for officers training. But where they wanted to place me, I wasn't too happy to go. And so they eventually said, well, in that case, we could only put you one place in the infantry.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. But
All right.
once I got into the infantry and filled out the forms, and I was shipped into the maintenance.
Your basic training in Florida, were you staying in military barracks or in hotels?
Military barracks.
Military barracks, okay. And was that basically your first time away from home for an extended period of time?
Oh, yes. The only other time I was away from home was going to Pine Camp
Mhm.
for the yearly training.
And what was your basic training like? I know it was infantry, but did you train with...
Infantry basic.
Mhm. How long was that?
I think that was close to 3 months.
All right. And once you completed your basic training, what happened next?
Well, say a week before we completed the basic training, we were visited by a colonel of the area,
Mhm.
and that's when he told us that the war in Japan had ended. So a week later, I was in Florida, packed up, went back came back to Brooklyn, New York, for home. And I think I was home for about 2 weeks when I got a call to report to, if I remember correctly, I think it was back to Fort Dix, Jersey. And that's where I got my orders that I was going, instead of going to the Pacific, they were sending me to Europe. I served
the occupational?
Yeah, I served a year in Germany.
All right. Let me go back just a little bit. Do you recall the death of President Roosevelt?
Yes.
What was that like for you?
Shock.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He was a very popular president, so I was shocked and sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. It was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
All my life I had never heard of I had never been alive at the time that a president in office died.
Mm-hmm.
So,
All
and
right.
Roosevelt was a pretty popular president. So,
All right. So you went, they sent you to Europe as part of the occupational forces.
Yes.
How did you get over to Europe?
oh, went aboard a little, what was originally a little cruise ship in Florida. Actually, when I got drafted, after my basic training, when I called back to be assigned, I was sent to Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I finally was assigned to a ship. It was a cruise ship in Florida, which, if I remember correctly, the amount of people aboard ship on the trip, back to, actually we went from Florida, we went to France. And the members aboard the ship, I think it was 600 soldiers and a whole crew for the ship. It was a small ship, but 600. We filled the whole ship. There was hardly any room for anything but sleeping.
Now, were there anyone with you that you had served with in
No.
basic training?
No.
So there wasn't anyone that
No,
you
I
knew?
went in brand new.
Uh-huh. Did you get seasick at all?
No, I almost got seasick one night, but I used to smoke at the time. And actually, it was, if I remember correctly, I'm not too sure, but if I remember correctly, it was Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
When I went into the service, when I got aboard ship, actually all of us got assigned, went into the big meeting room, and after getting a lecture, they were asking for volunteers. And I still don't know why I did this, but I had always heard, don't volunteer. But they came up with they wanted someone to volunteer for a mail clerk. Nobody raised their hands. So I said, mail clerk, what the hell are you going to do as a mail clerk aboard a ship on in the middle of the ocean? So I raised my hand. It's the best job I had. You know? Go around every morning for about 3/4 of an hour, go around each deck of the ship, hollering mail clerk, just picking up the mail and delivering whatever mail was available. And that was my duty all the time. Besides, I had a lot of privileges.
Uh-huh. How was the food aboard ship?
It wasn't bad. The only time I really, as a matter of fact, the only time I really almost got sick was Thanksgiving Day. I was aboard ship in the middle of the Atlantic on Thanksgiving Day. And you see, because I accepted the duty of being mail clerk, one of the privileges was I could go eat at any time. Anytime the kitchen was open, I could go have my dinner, lunch, breakfast, whatever it is. So consequently, I must have been aboard ship about 4 days, and then it was Thanksgiving Day. And on Thanksgiving Day, the order came down that everybody, no matter what position you held, no matter what time you were supposed to go to dinner or to eat, you had to go with your company. If you didn't go with your company, you didn't eat. So I had to go with my company, you know. There were 3 decks. Imagine how big this ship was.
Mm-hmm.
The cruise capacity, I think, was something like 200 or 250 people. We were close to 800 men aboard ship. And this was the bottom deck where you went to eat. Now, one thing I learned there is never to eat on the top floor, because that's where all the aroma comes. And being in the Army, you know, they don't rush you through.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going down these stairways, and that aroma is coming up. And I'm not a kind of guy. I think in my lifetime, I've gotten seasick once. And it was an upset stomach.
Mm-hmm.
And the time I almost came to it, closest, was that time, Thanksgiving Day, in 1945, or 44 rather.
Mm-hmm.
Because I learned one thing, if they have a mess hall above the first floor, don't go. Because that's where you get all those aromas mixed together.
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit of the rocking of the ship, because it was only, it was a cruise ship for people down in the soft waters, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Ships down there just glide along the water. Not in the Atlantic. In the Atlantic, kind of rough.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, it was so bad in the Atlantic that one night after dinner, I went up on deck, and I was smoking, and put my hand over the side of the rail on the deck to touch the water every time it rocked. And we were on the second deck. So it was rough, really rough. People the guys were sick, like going out of style.
Mm-hmm. Now, whereabouts did you land?
We landed in Le Havre, France.
Mm-hmm.
From Le Havre, France, we got on boxcars, and eventually landed up in Frankfurt, Germany.
And what was your impression of Germany when you got there? Was the devastation from the war still fairly evident?
Oh yes, yes. I went into Germany. Yeah, finally, I was assigned to a maintenance place in Frankfurt, Germany. Very few roofs were intact.
Mm-hmm.
Houses and streets were bombed out. It was quite devastating.
Now, you were in the maintenance unit. What sort of maintenance?
Automatic transmissions, which was something new at the time, if you remember. Automatic transmissions came available in 41.
Uh-huh.
So this was 45, 44, 45. So practically new, because they didn't produce any for a couple of years. And automatic transmission job was sort of special.
Mm-hmm.
So I became in charge of the inspection department and the repair and maintenance department on automatic transmissions mostly.
Now, were these transmissions for cars or for trucks?
Cars.
Cars?
They also had them for trucks, but I didn't, where I was, we didn't do truck work.
Mm-hmm.
Just automobiles and small command cars and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the Jeeps didn't have them, the command cars had them.
Do you think you were placed in that position because of your background and experience?
I had been, actually I think the automatic transmissions hit the market about 1940.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there were a couple of years of non-production. So it was more of a specialized field. Actually, where I worked, to give you an idea, we had 10 mechanics. Only 3 of us did automatic transmissions. We were sent to school to learn the automatic transmission, and we became the only ones that do automatic transmissions.
What was your living conditions like over there?
Comfortable, but not too comfortable. Automobile, I had an automobile. Getting gas was a problem.
Now, was that a military vehicle, or did you own
Oh,
it?
you mean while I was in the service?
Yeah.
Well, while I was in the service, my living conditions were pretty good. I attained the rank of tech sergeant. So, and I was in charge. I had a crew of 15 men working under me. I had 7 GIs and 8 displaced men working for me in the department that I controlled. So I controlled the department that were doing the work, and I was also in control of the inspection department. I was in charge of the inspection department.
Did you have much interaction with the civilian population?
Oh yeah. I actually, so I'm almost ashamed to say this, because people say, gee, you were in for a whole year. That was the best year of my life. I got in there, got into Germany, and of course, Germany was all disrupted by that time. And I got in, and inside of a month, I had a commanding position. Especially the job I had, because I was in charge of inspection and taking in or deciding which vehicles were to be worked on first, because we had a backlog of maybe 100 vehicles. So anybody that came in, like from the maintenance, not from the maintenance, anybody from any one of the branches of the service that had a vehicle that had to be repaired was always looking to get it out the next day when there were 90 cars ahead of them. So if I got them out, I became a nice guy. And that's a good job being a nice guy, believe me. Very good.
Now, how were you treated by the civilian population?
Ironically, I was treated very well, very well. I had so well that I seriously thought of going. Actually, when the war ended in Germany, especially, the Army was giving any third comrade, sergeant and up, the option, if you re-enlisted for a 3-year period, they would fly us home to the States. We get a month's furlough in the States, fly us back to Germany, put us back in our same position, the same organization, and you'd be back in with stripes and everything. So I almost did. Actually, I went back to do it, because when I got home, well, of course, being away such a long time, when I come back, all my friends were married. They had families by now and so forth. So, it's like starting a new life. You have new friends and so forth. So I decided to go back into the service. When I went back, I think I was a short period of time older. They had eliminated that privilege. So I couldn't go back to my same outfit, and I couldn't stay home for a month on furlough. So I stayed home a little longer. And when I finally decided I was going to go back, which was about, let's see, I got discharged, I think it was in November. And around March the following year, I made a final decision that I was going to go back in the Army anyway, no matter what they did. I went to say goodbye to a young lady that I was close to. She lived in Pennsylvania and I lived in Brooklyn. Went to say goodbye, instead I said hello. 5 months later, we were married.
So I take it you didn't go back in the Army?
No. Yeah.
So did you stay in Pennsylvania for a while?
No. We got married in Pennsylvania, but I had a job. I had been working for Oldsmobile for that time, maybe 14, 15 years. I didn't want to just pack up and leave and go to Pennsylvania and hope on getting another job. So we decided that she would move into Brooklyn. Moved into Brooklyn. I stayed at my regular job until a final day came when I just said that I had enough. But I did all right.
So you retired from the automobile business?
Yes, I left the automobile business in 1960, I think, something like that. 59, something like that. Somewhere around that time. I left the automobile business and I went into a different business.
Okay.
I taught automotive trades.
Oh. Did you do that through like a trade school or a technical school?
Yeah, technical school, private technical school.
And whereabouts was that? Was that still in the Brooklyn area?
That was in Brooklyn area. As a matter of fact, that was even closer to my home than the job I had been working for before. I stayed there for a while, and then by this time, I guess I got my hair ruffled or something. And when I worked for the Oldsmobile people, I stayed so long because they kept promising me that they were going to eventually, I was supposed to become shop manager. But they gave me a hosing on that deal, and then I earned a little bit of a bonus. But I went back and I taught hydraulic transmissions. I stayed there for about a year, and had another little Italian temper. So I had a student that was actually this school that I worked for was kept by the government. And all the GIs that couldn't, they were looking for trades and stuff. But I guess I was a little too particular. I felt I was going to teach automatic transmissions, which I had done for years and took me a long time to learn. I was going to teach them. They didn't come to learn. They came to get the money. So I threw one of the students out. And I went in and told the supervisor, the head supervisor, I don't want him in my class anymore. Do whatever you want with him. So the next day, he never showed up. So he was out of the class for about a month. Then one morning, I went to class and they stood there. I said, what are you doing here? He says, I'm back in school. No, you're not back in school in my class. Get that alone. I went up to see the head instructor and I said, what's going on? This guy's back in my class. Man, he says, the government's paying for him, and that's the way we subsist on money coming in. He's got to stay there. So if he stays, I'm leaving. So he says, come on, I'm leaving. But he didn't think I was leaving. But next payday, I took my tools and my apron and stuff and just walked out. It's a good deal. The best thing that happened to me because I went on to become, I went back to school a little bit. I went back to school for insurance, and I became an insurance agent, insurance broker. So I didn't do too much work as a broker, but I became an agent. I retired after 30 years. So that wasn't too bad a job, was it?
No, I guess not. Now,
No
was that in
pension. No pension.
Uh-huh.
So I didn't stay because of the pension. I stayed because I liked the job. I was making the living wage.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing big, nothing small. But I guess I had to. I knew that my wife had gotten tired. Of course, I used to leave the house at 8 o'clock in the morning. And 3-4 nights a week, I wouldn't come home until 9 or 10 o'clock or later.
Mm-hmm.
And that means being out of the house from the morning until 9 or 10 o'clock. So my wife had the problem of raising the children and governing them, you know. And one night we were sitting down and said something about the business. So I said, what are you talking about? She says, what, do you want me to retire? And she says, yeah, I wouldn't mind. This was 30 years later. I said, I wouldn't mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. I had won a trip to Hawaii from the company. So I said, we go to Hawaii. When we come back, I'll submit my resignation. And that's just what I did.
So you've been enjoying retired life ever
I've
since?
been enjoying retired life since I was 63 years old. I'm now 90, so
No,
can't say I've done wrong. Can I?
no, not at all. Now, let me just go back a little bit. You did have an older brother that was in the service during the
Yes,
war?
my older brother was in service. As a matter of fact, he was one of the first draftees.
Now, what was his name?
Emilio.
Okay. Now, is he still living, or?
No, he passed on about 8-10 years ago, I guess.
Okay. And he served in Italy?
He started, he went in the beginning, so
Mm-hmm.
when he went in, he was sent into Africa. And he worked Africa, Sicily, Italy, Germany, then back to Germany. And I don't know where he got discharged from, but he got discharged about 3 months after I was inducted.
Now, was he in an infantry unit? Do you know, or?
No, he was in a post office unit. I forget what they call that.
Okay.
Um,
Like what they refer to as an APO, Army Postal.
yeah, he was always ahead of the troops or
Mhm.
right behind the troops, setting up telephone systems and so forth. He
Okay.
served, I think he served about 50 months
Okay.
in the service. He was drafted the year the war started,
Mm-hmm.
and he came out in 45. A few months after I went in, he was discharged.
Okay. Now, have you made use of the GI Bill at all to buy a home, or?
I didn't make enough at home. I think the only thing I got out of it was going to school to learn life insurance
Mhm.
or general insurance. So it was only something that lasted maybe about a year of schooling. That's not full-time school, it's
Mhm.
after work.
Now, you didn't go back into the National Guard at all, did you?
No,
Okay.
I got married instead.
Okay.
Got a job.
Did you join any veterans organizations?
Yes, I belong to the,
There's the Legion,
Legion.
the American Legion. All right. Have you stayed in contact at all with anyone you were in the service with?
I stayed in contact for about 6 months, and then they just weren't answering anymore,
Mm-hmm.
so I didn't answer.
While you were overseas, did you get to see any sort of USO shows or anything like
No.
that? No?
No, never had the opportunity.
All right. And how do you think your time in the service changed or affected your life?
I don't know, except I guess that it made me more aware of the fact that I like the life that I've lived since. Also, as you see, I joined the National Guard, so I still have a love for the service. And the fact that for about 5 months, I was very seriously thinking of going back. Which I must have liked it.
Okay.
Actually, you know, this is the God's honest truth. Being a person who was born and lived through the Depression, I lived up to the time that I went into the service, the short period of time that I served with the National Guard. I liked the service. And I very seriously thought of going. Actually, I didn't even want to come home. It was at the time that, at that particular time, in order to get the servicemen that were drafted were being discharged, but also given what I thought was a good deal. Able to re-enlist. I think it was a 3-year re-enlistment. You go into you're back into the service. Excuse me. You were able to regain your rank. You had a choice of where you wanted to serve. You could request serving your same outfit. And I had a good job. I not to brag, but I got along very well. Actually, I was in Frankfurt on the Main in Germany. And I think I had as much power, and maybe more, than the mayor of Frankfurt. The connections I had, so I had a very good deal. So I was going to stay back. Actually, this again is the truth. We're overseas. In order to make a telephone call home, they set up a waiting list. So you signed up, and they took into consideration the time of service, the kind of service you had, you know, if you had any black marks against you or anything. And then they put you on a list. And when that list would come up, they would call you about a week before time and say, you're coming home, like in my particular case, they say you're coming home, it was a Saturday night or a Sunday night, I forget, that you'd get a phone call home. The Army would let you call home, and if you re-enlisted, they would fly you to your home, give you a month leave, fly you back to your, if you wanted, fly you back to the same place that you left to go home, withhold your same rank, everything was the same, so, right? For me, that was ideal. I was actually trying to re-enlist to get this deal. Of course, they would send you home, they would fly you home at Army expense, fly you back for your month off. And I thought it was great. And that's what I went to say, that's the reason I went to say goodbye to the woman that wound up being my wife.
But she had other plans.
Well, I don't know. I must have had other plans too, because it was, I tell you, we were to go out on a date. I knew her cousin in Pennsylvania. So I was going to go to Pennsylvania to see her cousin and say goodbye to him and his mother and father. And I was going to say goodbye to her, telling I was going back to Germany, going back into the army anyway, because I didn't know where I would be going. And that night, her cousin was to meet his girlfriend, which was in another town in Pennsylvania. I had a previous engagement, which was supposed to be my last night in Pennsylvania, to see people, because I had made a lot of friends while I was in the army, and a number of them came from Pennsylvania, and two guys that I worked with in Brooklyn married girls that came from Pennsylvania. So, when I went to Pennsylvania, I made the rounds, and met the girl that was my friend's cousin. Met her and says, all right, let's go. I was going to meet her cousin and his girlfriend in a place in Pennsylvania. There was some kind of a festival or something. So went to pick up this young lady. I took her out to meet, after the dinner with the friends, right? Took her out to meet, to go out with the group. We got there, couldn't find them. Couldn't find the people that I was supposed to meet. So driving around, and the next day, I said, my wife, the girl wound up being my wife, was not the kind of a person, well, let's say she came from a family, a strict Italian family. Treated her very well. Family treated her very well. But, there was, hey, you don't go out with any guy you want, come home at 12 o'clock at night. That was taboo. So, actually, her parents and my sister were friends. So anyway, I went to pick her up, took her out. Instead of coming back at 11 o'clock, which we were supposed to come back, it was after 12. But in the meantime, trying to look for my friends, we found ourselves on the road. She didn't know where we were. I didn't know where we were. We stopped on the side because she picked out a place, and that place I knew because I had been traveling back and forth. And I picked there, stopped the car, and I said, this is not the place you want to go. She says, no, I hear it's a nice place. I've been there. I said, you haven't been here. She says, yeah, it's a nice dance hall. I said, no dance hall, it's a neighborhood bar. They got a dance floor, but you don't want to go there. And that's the night it popped a question from out of nowhere, believe me, because I had no idea that I was going to get back. I was going in the service. I went to see her cousin, who was the guy I knew, and say goodbye to him and his parents, because at the time I went there, I stayed there. They treated me very nicely. That's why I went. So it wasn't planned, wasn't nothing. I was surprised after I popped the question. What the hell did I do? But anyway, best thing that ever happened.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for your interview.
Thank you. I hope
It was excellent.
makes somebody happy.
All right. Was there any questions you wanted to ask at all?
Don't ask any embarrassing questions now.
One thing, when Wayne asked you what the meaning of the experience in the service was, you said it gave you the meaning for the rest of your life. So that's what you learned, right? The biggest lesson. We go back to the tape. You said one of the biggest or greatest lessons you learned from being in the service was the meaning for the rest of your life. What do you mean by that?
Well, being in Brooklyn at the time, I lived a life which was pretty much regulated by me. In other words, if I wanted to, I worked at the Oldsmobile place for, 16, 17 years.
Okay.
In most cases, you work for a place for 16, 17 years, and you have a pretty good situation. There were only 3 mechanics in the shop that were considered good mechanics, that were considered mechanics that if the men who were checking the cars didn't know what to do or didn't have any idea of what the problem was, we 3 guys were the guys that they would come to, because evidently we had more knowledge than the other guys. So if you...
I thought you meant something, that you learned something in the service that then gave the rest of your life the purpose that you've had.
Well, I don't know. I learned one thing while I was in the service, that I guess I learned part of it during my lifetime too, early part of the lifetime, is that people usually react towards you pretty close to the way you treat them. I have believed that for a long time.
In the service probably gave you order and discipline that you probably didn't have in your earlier years.
That's for sure. And I like the service because of the fact that things were planned for you. And all you had to do was say, yeah, I'd like it. And in most cases, you would get it. You were in a service, what I saw was if you were in there and you didn't like the job that you had, it wasn't too great a job to get something that you liked. And it was regimentation, but it was also, regimentation is also like being in prison, but this was different because this was regimentation that you could use for your benefit, and you could use to advance your ideas in life. Right? You didn't necessarily have to do another person's demand, because you had a sergeant like me, you may have had to do that. But I had 15 men, I had no problems with my men.
And that, what you learned, is what really helped you for the rest of your life.
I think so.
Yeah, great.
I think so.
All right, well, thank you.
Oh, thank you.